Welcome to This Week, Next Week, a podcast from Group M and WPP. I'm Kate Scott-Dawkins. I'm joined here by Jeff Foster and Nidhi Shah. Apologies for the couple of weeks hiatus. Those of you who are regular listeners, it has been frantic, I think. Frantic sounds chaotic. Maybe not frantic, but just extremely busy the last couple of weeks, mainly with our production of the new forecast this year, next year, which is going to be released externally publicly June 10th. And we're going to spend some time talking about that later in the pod as well. Plus all the earnings and team members moving house. It's just been incredibly busy. I don't know. Would you guys characterize it any differently, or how has it felt for you, Jeff? This is your first time through a forecast process, so I'm curious to hear how you're dealing with it.
Yeah, it's definitely been a busy process in the last 3-4 weeks or so, but it's been fun. It's really interesting to see everything come together, especially at a high level and on a global scale.
Good. And Nidhi, this is you're an old hand now.
Yeah, that's true. But I think busy is the new word for the team, right? Especially with everything going across. So yeah, busy is the new us. And on top of that, I've just moved into my new house. So really exciting with the busy times.
Excellent. So we've got a few things to talk about. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do a deep dive on all of the media owners that have reported since we last did a podcast. We'll talk about a couple of things. I think we're going to get into Google I/O a little bit later. Xiaomi did just report this morning, so I have a few notes on them. But let's kick off there. Let's start with the top media owners. And Jeff, you had something on Paramount.
Yeah, so it was just made some recent news that another sign that the sports world is red hot as media companies need more content to stand out. So World Rugby just signed a deal with CBS Sports and Paramount Plus for all men's and women's World Rugby events through 2029. So that would be the next 3 Rugby World Cups and all the USA national team matches. And it's interesting because it's the largest distribution deal for the sport in the U.S. And it just, again, shows all the value placed on live sports, especially for the streamers.
So I'm both excited about this and, maybe not. I'll tell you. I mean, this is great for rugby. This is a sport that I didn't watch until meeting my husband, who's South African. And so now a big rugby fan. Springboks have done very well recently. And we have been watching on Peacock, which is also where I watch most of my other sports, like the Olympics and cycling and SF Giants baseball. So it does mean I'm going to have to remember different services for where I'm going for sports. But great news for World Rugby and hopefully for more viewership in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, have not as a self-proclaimed not a huge rugby fan. I mean, I'm going to be interested to check it out. I think it's going to be, it's going to be really interesting to see how some of these smaller sports grow in the U.S. over the coming years, especially as they get more and more visibility on the streamers.
Yeah. Yeah, Six Nations is great. Rugby Sevens, I don't know if that's included, but that's always a fun, fast-paced sport, and Americans could get behind that one. Yeah, okay, good. And Xiaomi earnings today. I thought it was useful to cover this one because they are brand new to our list of top 25 media owners. Advertising revenue for 2024 was $3.5 billion, just behind Pinterest at 3.6. So maybe a company that a lot of people aren't familiar with as a media owner. Very big in terms of smartphone sales. They did report total revenue up 47% year on year in the first quarter, which is probably... You wouldn't know, I guess, that the rest of the world was tipping into a global trade war. Just over $50 billion total revenue was the 2024 total, about the same size as HP and roughly 8 times smaller than Apple. Although unlike Apple, they have been producing smart EVs. So you don't have to be the world's most valuable tech company to do that, apparently.
Is Xiaomi the only top large media holder that also produces cars?
Ooh. Yeah.
Right, aren't they?
Yeah.
I believe they are.
There's a distinction. There you go.
Yeah. I think they're the only one.
Yeah, their smart EV, AI, and other initiatives business segment was up 16.7% in the quarter. Smart EV sales in Q1 totaled $2.5 billion, and the company delivered more than 75,000 vehicles in the first quarter. So part of that expanding China-based EV companies that we're watching there as well, alongside BYD and others. So yeah. Also, smartphones are now under half of all revenue. They've made a big push. They talk about their strategy being car, home, and phone and AI. They also sell air conditioners. It's a very wide-ranging business. The smartphone shipments grew 3%. Revenue was up 8.9% year over year. And advertising for the first quarter, revenue was more than $900 million USD, up 19.7% year on year. And they talked about advertising. It was called out specifically as helping to drive higher profit margins in the smartphone and AIoT segment. The company has nearly 1 billion connected IoT devices now, including all their smartphones and laptops on the platform. So that's a big user base, basically, for first-party data and advertising and all the rest of it. Any other thoughts on Xiaomi? Are we thinking? I mean, they have obviously global smartphone shipments, and we should check if the cars have been sold or shipped anywhere other than China, but definitely one to watch in terms of expanding ambitions there.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the reviews on the car have been incredible here in the US market, so I'm curious to see how they continue to develop out their portfolio.
Oh, interesting. I haven't read any of the actual reviews yet. I mean, it looks very snazzy.
Yeah, no, it's amongst all the car reviewers, it's been getting really good reviews.
Okay, good to know. There was one last thing that I thought was really interesting from the transcript. They said that at the beginning of the year, they said their R&D investment should reach yuan of $30 billion or 30 billion renminbi, which means that the R&D investment over the last 4 years, from 2021 to 2025, will exceed 102 billion renminbi. And they've now said that the target for 2026 to 2030 is 200. So basically doubling investment over the next 4 years. And they've said they're going to start talking about and start releasing investment in AI. So another one in terms of this huge AI CapEx investment that we're seeing across tech companies globally. And that's probably a good segue into Google I/O, I think. Another company investing a lot in its AI offerings. What did everyone make of the Google I/O announcements? Nidhi, we'll start with you.
I thought it was quite fascinating, just the kind of different announcements from kind of AI mode to kind of the agentic purchasing feature. I think I was quite excited about the agentic purchasing feature, just, being able to imagine, you can buy this when the price drops below a certain amount and try on all these fancy clothes. And I think it's kind of nice to have these interactive features, especially for kind of the commerce world, especially for engagement going forward, which I think is crucial in a world where things are becoming more personalized and automated.
Yeah. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, no, the try-on feature I think was really, really cool to see it demoed. And also the glasses really stood out. I watched the demonstration on that. It was really cool, where it has the display in the lens itself, so it can do everything from taking real-time directions to the translation feature, which was really cool. And then if you're staring at a business and you want to find out more information about it, about what's that's getting good reviews or what's on the menu, you can do that through their glasses. So I thought that was really, really interesting to see how that's going to go. And it's interesting also to note that they have their partners for the glasses are Gentle Monster and Warby Parker, their initial eyewear partners. So they're definitely going for a wide spectrum, because Gentle Monsters are pretty premium and Warby Parker makes a wide range. So I think it sounded like those will be rolling out in the next year or so. It was a little hard to get specifics, but I know they're going to developers soon. And I think it's also important to note that the big difference between this and the Meta Ray-Bans is the display in the lens that shows you actual things in the world that you're looking at. And it was interesting how they also highlighted how all these features can be accessed without even taking your phone out of your pocket. So you can make calls, you can send text messages. So I think it puts a little bit more pressure on the future of the hardware device, especially on phones and for phone manufacturers.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, there was just a lot. Like, it was packed, all the announcements that were made, so much so watched it with my husband, who's a software developer. He was, I think, kind of blown away with the volume of announcements and things that they were releasing, and showed me some of the tech reviewers that he watches on YouTube saying all kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And there's almost a sense of, I don't know, for me, purely anecdotal, purely personal sort of feeling. There was a long time where, the green message bubbles on iOS phones, that it was so uncool to have any Google tech. Maybe now there's a slight feeling like the coolest new stuff is coming out for Pixel and Google. That was kind of an interesting feeling, the shift between people talking about Siri being delayed and, not up to snuff on the AI. That's sort of platform world, and Google releasing just a ton of stuff related to AI. Anyone else have that sense?
Yeah, my takeaway from watching it was, if you had any questions about Google's AI strategy, this seemed to answer almost everything. So I don't think, I think it's pretty clear what their strategy is and how it's going to play out. And it's really exciting. I mean, everything from all the content creation, some of the digital video that they showed was really, really cool.
Yeah, look at that. We're looking at all of this as it relates to impact on advertising. Of course, they talked about ads within AI overviews, but of course, just the extent of searches that are coming up with AI interviews. And Nidhi, you pulled a stat. What was the stat around that?
Yeah, so there's like about a 10% jump in queries over AI overviews, and especially in the US and India, which are one of their largest markets, right? So really interesting.
Yeah, so what does that do to just how the web itself? Where do people still go to websites? Do they not? What does the ad environment look like within AI overview, not just in Google, but across search more broadly and the web more broadly? So trying to build all of that into the forecast, which is always exciting, especially when there are huge announcements like this, a couple of weeks out from publication. So it's been very interesting, but there's certainly plenty around the shifting nature of web, the shift from human visitors to websites to bot visitors to websites potentially, that are all going to drive changes. We think advertising is still a very viable business model. Obviously, we have tech companies like Xiaomi growing that as a large part of their business. We have retailers, we have financial services businesses adding advertising as a revenue model. So that feels healthy. It's just a question of where that shows up, what types of companies advertisers want to work with, what are the largest growth areas, and how is AI going to shift all of that. Just those small things. It's fine.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's like we're living in a science fiction episode of like some TV show, but it's very real, and it's moving very, very fast. When you think about just AI a few years ago, when it was like writing poems and songs, and that was sort of like what, kind of got it going in the mainstream. And look where it is now. It's just evolved so much.
The VO stuff, the Flow stuff from Google I/O, we haven't talked about that yet. All of the video generation, video with audio, with sound effects, how easy it is to do that. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And for higher paying tiers now, but you can certainly see how once that gets cheaper, and the trend is towards all of these token costs for generation to get cheaper, what that could mean for just the tonnage of content that's being created, both at a premium level, yes, filmmakers and people using it, as well as rolled out to wider audiences and creators on these platforms.
Yeah, I did notice that they did highlight how a lot of these tools would be available for creators on YouTube.
Yep, for sure. There is, science fiction piece of things, right? How quickly are we going to go from these initial, it's okay, but it's not really the same as what a human could produce, into this is way better than a human could do? That feels like it's changing very, very rapidly. One of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and reading and building into, again, what our thoughts are for this year, next year, going forward, are theories and papers and scenario planning like AI 2027, which for your listeners, if you haven't read that yet, it is well worth a read. And also alongside of that, if that feels like it's too optimistic or scary in terms of how fast AI is going to sort of potentially reach a super intelligence level, there's another author on Substack, Melanie Mitchell, who talks about AI as basically a bag of heuristics, which I find very interesting. So the idea is that, or the question is, are AI models really building intelligence and understanding the way that humans are? Or are there just really a bunch of heuristics or rules that they're using to predict and do well at tasks, even though their world model wouldn't look the same or function the same as a human's, where you change the task a little bit or you pull out this piece of information and all of a sudden their performance drops. So you could spend all day, every day, I think, immersing yourself in this, and marketers are going to have to do more and more of that, I think, moving forward. All right. Well, talking about where we're immersing ourselves, what are people learning or what are people finding from this UNEC track? Because we've talked about it on this podcast a lot. Hopefully most of the people listening are familiar, but maybe I'll take a minute or two just to talk about everything that goes into producing this forecast. So this year, next year is our flagship Group MWPP advertising forecast. As I said, we'll launch it publicly on June 10th. Very exciting. We'll do, I think, an overview podcast once it's live, giving all the actual numbers and official numbers, which we won't release until then. It really looks at media owner revenue rather than advertiser spend, and that's because the revenue is much more concentrated in a smaller group of sellers than the buying is across a very, very long tail of advertisers. That's one thing to keep in mind. We look both top down and bottoms up. So we're looking at the global and regional information we have from top media sellers. And then we're also looking at intelligence from across 60 plus markets when we work with Group M contributors across the network. And we really couldn't do this work without them. They're so critical and so knowledgeable about their individual markets, and that really flows into the report as well. And then we're looking at all that and modeling against also, macroeconomic pictures, which has been extra difficult this year, and technological advances, drivers across regulation. So there's really a lot that goes into it. And I learn new things every year, which is great. I don't know if there's anything that stands out. And we talked a little bit about this last week too, but if there's anything else that stands out today around what we've been working on or particular challenges with markets you're looking at.
I think in Europe, it's been interesting, especially in the legacy media space, just kind of seeing the strategic acquisitions across European markets. Take in the UK, for example, Bauer acquiring Clear Channel's North Europe out-of-home division. In Norway, Stead acquiring T4, which is a broadcaster in Sweden, and MTV4 in MTV in Finland. So really as media owners looking to strengthen their positions and kind of diversify. And I think what's also interesting is, more and more markets talking about programmatic buying expanding into kind of these legacy media channels, right? So, digital out of home and TV. And kind of one of the examples that really struck me was Austria, and they're rolling out this system called TV Load, which optimizes linear TV ads in real time using audience data. And I think this is kind of revolutionizing how TV advertising is done, kind of moving away from pre-planned fixed ad breaks to more kind of dynamic data-driven optimization, which I think is going to be incredibly important, right, as we kind of move towards that kind of automation and, in this AI world.
Yeah, it's how I think that long tail of advertisers that has primarily been using digital over the last decade or so is used to buying, though, as much as TV companies, linear TV companies, especially legacy media companies, that have really stuck to this core group of large advertisers to the extent that they can expand their total addressable market to the broader swath of advertisers by making it easier, by making things more self-service, by making things more programmatic or at least automated. I think that helps them, right? If we're going to have some numbers in the report around the share of total advertising that the top 350 global brands make up, and how the channel split or the channel allocation split looks quite different, right? Amongst those top 350 brand advertisers versus the rest of the market, and where potentially, again, legacy TV, legacy audio advertisers could be looking for growth in the rest of that big market there. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from, especially looking across the Americas, it's, very interesting to see that, especially CTV, we're hearing that a lot, even in some markets where traditional television remains relatively strong. And I think as someone who also spent a lot of time in the TV industry, it's just really fascinating to see out of home is very strong across most markets. And there's a fair amount of markets where, out of home is actually like on pace to surpass audio down the road, which would make it the third largest channel in a lot of markets. So I think it's very interesting to see that the staying power of that.
Yeah, and then eventually we'll get to that Minority Report view, right?
Right.
Popping up in malls next to you, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of the sci-fi genre again, yeah.
Yes, Back to the Future 2, where the Jaws comes out of the movie theater for the commercial.
There's such a lot of, because there's a big out of home component in the new Blade Runner too, wasn't there? I feel like there's a lot of use of out of home and
billboards and
future
projections.
Yeah,
so
it's a very visceral way to show a different cityscape, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was very interesting to see that across a lot of the markets that we cover.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Anything we are looking forward to this week other than wrapping up work on this year, next year, so we can finally start, presenting the numbers and talking about it rather than being in our little work bubbles?
Apart from unpacking some of my boxes, I've started watching The Race Around the World on the BBC, which is really fascinating because they're looking into traveling across India this time around. So very, very nice watch if anyone's interested.
Nice.
So definitely have to look into that. Yeah, we have the NBA finals will be coming up soon. Right now, it's very exciting in New York for all the Knicks fans. I am not a Knicks fan, but the city's always pretty fun when the local teams go far. And ratings have been very solid. Yeah, Lakers.
Lakers, okay.
Yeah, nobody's a real Clippers fan. Sorry, I might get some heat for that one, but I hope Steve Ballmer isn't listening. But if he is, sorry.
The Giants games, and then I've been catching up on the latest season of Taskmaster, which if anyone's been a long time listener, you will know that is my, my jam. I watch a lot of British television, and Taskmaster is one of my all-time favorites. So this year they have an American, Jason Mantzoukas, on, and it's been very, very good. Even 19 seasons in, it's still as good as the first one, I think. All right. Well, again, sorry for the hiatus in recording for a couple of weeks, but we have been absolutely up to our eyeballs in data. So we will be back with you again, as I said, to give you the actual numbers from the report rather than just teasing what we've been working on. And until then, I will speak soon. Thanks. This Week, Next Week is a podcast from Group M and WPP. The views expressed are meant for informational and entertainment purposes only and are not to be taken as financial advice. If you have questions or comments for the show, you can email business.intelligence@groupm.com.